Hey, this is Tony here with Salt Strong, and in this video I want to give you some tips when purchasing a used kayak or paddleboard. There are some things you want to be looking out for, and also I'm not going to be spitting out brand names or types of kayaks or anything like that, because what works for one person may not work for another person, so it's really personal preference. So the number one recommendation that I can give you to start out with is to ask the seller if you can actually get out on the water and try it out. See if they can meet you at the lake or out on the coast, wherever you may live, to actually test the kayak out and make sure it's a good fit for you. Now, that water test will not only let you know if it's a good kayak for you, but it will also help you see if there's any leaks or cracks or anything like that more easily than if you just did a dry look at the kayak and looked it over. But I do want to give you some tips as far as what to look for on the kayak or paddleboard, just to make sure you get the most for your money. Now, another big tip that I like to give people is whatever kayak you are looking at online, or somebody that may be trying to sell you, try to do your research. Research that kayak, see what the weight capacity is, see how much the kayak weighs, because for weight capacity, it really depends on how much you weigh and also how much gear you bring with you. So the general rule of thumb with weight capacity is you want about a 100-pound buffer. So if you weigh, let's say 200 pounds, and then let's average about maybe 75 to 100 pounds of gear with you, that's 300 pounds right there. So you want a kayak or paddleboard that has at least 100 pounds more than that total as kind of a buffer. You never want to go right at the weight capacity. You don't want to overload your kayak or your paddleboard. It's very dangerous. It can cause you to be very unstable, and the kayak or paddleboard will sit very low to the water and could take on water. Also, the total weight of the kayak, you don't want to get something that's too heavy that you can't handle yourself, because if you have a car or SUV that you have to put that kayak or paddleboard up on top of, or perhaps you have to store it up on the ceiling, hanging from the ceiling, you don't want to get anything that is too overbearing and that you can't handle by yourself. So definitely make sure you're researching what you're looking for online before you actually go and look at it. Now, once you do actually get a chance to go look at the kayak or the paddleboard, there are a few things you want to check for. First thing I like to do is check underneath the hull. Check for any deep gouges or very deep scratches that could possibly lead to a leak over time. Also, check the front and the rear of the kayak on the underneath. That's typically the most wear that the kayak is going to see, because when people drag their kayaks, they're either dragging it on the nose or on the very back end, and that area will wear out. So definitely check the front and the back of the hull underneath. The next area you want to check are the scupper holes. While you're looking underneath the hull, check around the scupper holes, see if there's any cracks. Also check up top, see if there's any cracks around those scupper holes. Those areas are very infamous for being areas where they get cracked and also leak, and it's kind of hard to find them. People don't really think about it, but when people use those carts where the cart actually goes up into the scupper holes, it's very bad for the kayaks. It puts a lot of pressure on those areas and they can crack. So definitely check out those areas for cracks or leaks. The next areas that you want to check on a kayak or paddleboard are the areas where there's a lot of pressure, where there's a lot of weight put on the kayak, such as the standing area, the seating area, and also anywhere such as in the rear tank well, where people would be having a cooler stored or their tackle box or anything strapped down, because those areas are going to have the most pressure applied to them, and they can be very weak over time and possibly have some cracks. So definitely make sure you're checking out those high pressure areas. Next up are the hatches. Any type of hatches that may be on the kayak that lead to the inside of the hull, check to make sure the hatches aren't loose, make sure the hardware that holds them on there isn't rusted or worn out. And also, if there's any seals around them, check the seals, make sure they're in good shape, nice and soft. If they're very stiff and corroded, you may have to replace them, and it will cause leaks over time. So definitely be checking out the hatches. Lastly, just do an overall inspection of the hull, looking for any type of dents or anything like that. If people store kayaks improperly, like on their side, puts a lot of pressure on one point of the kayak and it can cause a dent, and those dents can eventually lead to cracks. Lastly, just do an overall inspection of the entire hull, especially along the sides, looking for any dents or cracks, and also look for any discoloration. If the color of the kayak, especially on top, looks very discolored, kind of faded, that's a good indicator that the kayak was probably left outside in the sun, and those UV rays over time will make that plastic very brittle and very susceptible to being cracked over time, especially if you put pressure on it. So definitely be checking the hull for dents and also any type of sun fading or discoloration, because again, that's a good indicator that kayak was out in the sun for a long time and it will become very brittle and make that plastic very brittle and fragile. So that will wrap up this video. Hopefully these tips will help you out if you are out there looking for a used kayak or paddleboard. It's typically the best way to go. If you go to buy a new one, you might spend $1,000, $2,000, maybe $3,000 on a brand new kayak, but there are some out there that people buy, they think they're gonna use all the time, they use it a handful of times, then they realize they're not using it, put it up for sale. You can get a much better deal on a pretty much almost new kayak by buying used. So definitely make sure you can test out that kayak or paddleboard before you buy it. That will let you know if it works for you. Again, like I said before, what works for one person may not be suitable for you. So definitely make sure you can try it out. Also, trying it out will open up your eyes to any issues the kayak may have, any leaks or anything like that. So definitely make sure you can try it out. Do a complete front to back inspection of the hull, those high pressure areas underneath, the scupper holes, the hatches, and also make sure the kayak isn't dented or has any sun fading to it, because again, that can definitely reduce the lifespan of that kayak after you buy it. So if you have any questions or comments about what I talked about in this video, or any additional tips on purchasing a used kayak or paddleboard, definitely leave those down below. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.